The first sign something was wrong wasn't the broken lock. It was the smell. Cigarette smoke. Inside my lake house. Now, let me tell you something. My late husband, Frank, built that house with his own two hands back in 1987. Cedar walls, stone fireplace, big wraparound porch overlooking Lake Hartwell. That place wasn't just property. It was the only place left in the world that still felt like him. And nobody smoked in that house. Nobody. So when I opened the front door and got hit with stale beer, cheap perfume, and Marlboro smoke, my stomach dropped so fast I thought I might pass out right there on the porch. At first, I thought maybe somebody broke in. Then I heard music blasting upstairs. Not soft music, party music. And then came laughter. Young laughter. Cocky laughter. The kind of laughter people make when they think there are no consequences waiting for them. I stood frozen in the entryway with my overnight bag still hanging from my shoulder. There were muddy footprints across my hardwood floors, empty beer cans on my kitchen counter. Somebody had draped a wet bikini over one of my dining chairs, like the whole place was a damn Airbnb. And sitting in my husband's recliner, his recliner, was my daughter-in-law's younger brother Tyler, with his feet kicked up, drinking whiskey from one of Frank's crystal glasses. He looked up at me and blinked. "Oh," he said casually, "you're early." Early. I stared at him for a second because I genuinely thought maybe I'd had a stroke and entered another dimension. 3 girls I'd never seen before were dancing in the living room. Some shirtless guy walked out of my kitchen eating deli meat directly from the package. And then my daughter-in-law, Melissa, came down the stairs wearing my robe. My robe. The silk navy one Frank bought me for our anniversary before he died. She stopped halfway down the staircase when she saw me. For one tiny second, guilt flashed across her face. Then it disappeared. "Oh, good," she said. "You're here. We kinda need more ice." That right there, that was the moment something inside me changed. Not cracked, not hurt. Changed. See, people think older women become weak with age. Honey, no. We become dangerous. Because by the time you hit 70, embarrassment stops controlling you. Fear stops controlling you. Even loneliness stops controlling you. And once a woman has nothing left to fear, Lord have mercy. I slowly set my bag down by the door. "I didn't know you would be here," I said quietly. Melissa rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. "Well, Jake said it'd be fine. We just wanted one fun weekend before summer ended." Fun weekend? There were at least 15 people in my house. Somebody had scratched my dining table. The antique lamp in the hallway was cracked, and red lipstick was smeared across one of my white couch pillows. I looked at Jake. My son couldn't even meet my eyes. That hurt worse than the damage, because that boy knew what this house meant to me. Frank's ashes had been scattered off that dock. Jake learned to fish in that lake. Every Christmas morning for 30 years happened inside those walls. And somehow, my home became a frat house for Melissa's freeloading family. Melissa crossed her arms. "You weren't using it." I actually laughed, a short little laugh that made everybody uncomfortable. "You thought empty meant available?" Nobody answered. The music upstairs suddenly stopped. That's the thing about silence. Real silence scares guilty people. Tyler stood up slowly. "Look, Mrs. Parker, it's not that serious." I turned toward him. "Get your shoes off my husband's table." The room went dead quiet. He looked down. His muddy sneakers were resting on Frank's handcrafted coffee table. For a second, I thought he might mouth off. Instead, he slowly moved his feet. Smart boy. Melissa sighed dramatically. "Why are you making this into such a huge deal?" "Huge deal?" I looked around at the beer bottles, the strangers, the cigarette burns in my ashtray, the wet towels on my hardwood floors. Then I looked at her directly. Because this is the last time anybody mistakes my kindness for permission. Jake finally stepped forward. "Mom, come on." No. That one word shut him up instantly. See, Jake had spent 43 years hearing me smooth things over. I was the peacemaker, the fixer, the woman who always said, "It's okay." But it wasn't okay anymore, and deep down, he knew it. Melissa laughed under her breath. "So, what now? You're going to kick everybody out?" I looked her dead in the eye. "No, sweetheart," I said calmly. "I'm going to teach everybody a lesson." Then I turned around and walked out. Nobody stopped me. Behind me, I heard Melissa whisper, "She's bluffing." And that's exactly why they were screwed. The drive back to Atlanta took almost 3 hours. I didn't cry once. That surprised me. Usually, betrayal makes you emotional, but this felt different, cleaner somehow, like finally seeing a rotten tooth that had been hurting for years. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my mind was already organizing itself. Step 1. Money. You want to know what the funny thing about being the family matriarch? Everybody thinks you're just baking casseroles and mailing birthday cards. Meanwhile, you quietly control half the infrastructure holding everybody's life together. I walked into my office, opened my laptop, and started clicking. The first account I accessed was the business loan. 5 years ago, Jake wanted to open his landscaping company. The banks said no because his credit sucked. So guess who co-signed? Me. Guess who covered payroll twice during slow winters? Me. Guess whose retirement savings kept that business alive? Also me. And suddenly I realized something. I was financing my own disrespect. That ended at 7:42 p.m. I called the bank first thing Monday morning. "Hi," I said pleasantly. "I'd like to remove myself from all future financial liability connected to Parker Landscaping." The woman on the phone paused. "Are you sure?" "Oh, honey, I've never been more sure of anything." Next came the lake house. See, Jake thought he partially owned it because Frank once mentioned leaving it to him someday. Someday. People hear future promises and start acting like ownership already transferred. No, sir. The deed still had exactly one living name on it. Mine. By noon, I'd contacted an attorney, a property manager, and a security company. New locks, new cameras, new legal paperwork. Then I did something that would have shocked everybody who knew me. I booked myself a spa appointment. Because if I was about to burn down decades of emotional manipulation, I was going to do it with a fresh manicure. Tuesday morning, Jake showed up at my house looking exhausted. Melissa wasn't with him. Interesting. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, turning his baseball cap in circles with nervous hands. "Mom," he started carefully, "Melissa feels like you overreacted." I took a sip of coffee. "Does she?" "She said it was just one weekend." I nodded slowly. "And the smoking?" Jake winced. "And the strangers?" Silence. "And her brother sleeping in Frank's chair?" More silence. There it was. Accountability sitting heavy in the room like humidity before a storm. Jake rubbed his face. "She thought you wouldn't mind." "No," I corrected softly. "She thought I wouldn't stop her." That hit him hard. Because it was true. Melissa had spent 12 years pushing boundaries inch by inch. First borrowing dishes without asking, then accidentally keeping jewelry, then making comments about which furniture she wanted one day. And every single time, I stayed quiet to keep the peace. Big mistake, because every unspoken boundary becomes permission eventually. Jake stared at the table. She's embarrassed. I almost laughed again. Embarrassed, not ashamed, not sorry, embarrassed. Meaning the problem wasn't the behavior. The problem was consequences finally showed up wearing boots. I leaned forward slightly. Here's what's going to happen, I said calmly. Everybody will be out of my lake house by Friday. Jake nodded quickly. Okay. And Melissa's brother is never stepping foot on my property again. His head snapped up. What? And the locks are being changed Saturday morning. Mom, that's extreme. No, I said quietly. Extreme was strangers smoking in the house where your father took his last breath. That shut him down instantly. See, Jake forgot something. Frank died in that lake house. Heart attack, early morning, kitchen floor. I found him there, and ever since that day, I protected that house like sacred ground. Melissa knew that, which somehow made this whole thing uglier. Jake looked sick now. I didn't think about it like that. That's the problem, I said softly. None of you thought about me at all. And for the first time since he walked in, my son looked ashamed instead of defensive. But shame alone doesn't rebuild trust. Friday came, and nobody left. Not one damn person. In fact, Melissa posted Instagram pictures from my lake house that afternoon captioned, "Lake life with the fam." With the fam. I stared at that post for a full minute before smiling slowly to myself. Because right then, I stopped feeling hurt and started feeling strategic. By Saturday morning, they were all waking up to the sound of power tools outside the lake house, and none of them had any idea their entire world was about to flip upside down. I didn't answer the phone when my son called me the 5th time that night. Not because I was angry. Not even because I wanted revenge. I just finally understood something at 70 years old that most people never learn their whole life. The people who drain your peace will always call you cruel the second you stop letting them use you. And sitting there in my dark kitchen, staring at the security camera footage from my lake house, I realized my own family had been treating me like an open tab at a bar they never planned to pay for. The camera showed my daughter-in-law, Melissa, barefoot on my hardwood floors, laughing while her brother cannonballed into my lake from the dock I paid to rebuild after the storm last year. Beer cans everywhere, music blasting, strangers walking in and out of my house carrying coolers like it was some Airbnb frat party. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop. A man I had never seen before opened my antique liquor cabinet using a key. A key. To my house. I paused the footage and just sat there very still, because suddenly every weird feeling I'd ignored for years started lining up like dominoes. The missing wine bottles, the towels that disappeared, the scratches on my boat, the extra utility bills, the way Melissa always acted just a little too comfortable saying things like, well, one day this place will belong to Tyler anyway. I used to brush things off. That night, I stopped brushing things off. I replayed the footage again. Melissa walked past the camera holding a margarita pitcher and yelled, "Don't break anything, guys. Frank barely comes up here anymore." Everybody laughed. Barely comes up here anymore. Like I was already dead. Funny thing is, grief doesn't always hit you crying. Sometimes it hits you cold, quiet, like ice water in your veins. I got up, poured myself a bourbon, and called my attorney at 11:40 p.m. Not tomorrow morning, not after calming down, right then. Because people think patience means weakness. Nah. Patience is just delayed action, and mine had officially expired. The next morning, I drove 3 hours to the lake house without warning anyone. The whole drive, Tyler kept texting me, "Hey Dad, everything okay? You coming up this weekend? Melissa said you sounded weird last night." I ignored every message. When I finally pulled into the driveway, there were 6 cars parked on my lawn. My lawn. I sat in the truck for a second, looking at tire tracks through the grass I spent years maintaining myself after retirement. Then I saw smoke coming from the backyard grill, music booming, people screaming and laughing. Some teenage kid wearing swim trunks actually tossed a beer bottle into my flower bed while I watched from the windshield. That was the exact moment something inside me shut off. Not exploded, shut off. I stepped out of the truck and walked toward the house. Nobody noticed me first. Why would they? In their minds, I wasn't the owner anymore. I was just the old guy funding the lifestyle. When I reached the patio, Melissa finally saw me. Her smile disappeared so fast it almost looked painful. "Oh, Frank, you didn't say you were coming." I looked around calmly. There were wet towels all over my furniture, cigarette ashes on the deck, grease stains on the outdoor cushions my late wife picked out before she passed, and sitting in my favorite chair was Melissa's cousin with his muddy boots propped on the armrest. He looked at me and said, "What's up, old-timer?" Old-timer. I swear to God I almost laughed, because disrespect gets real bold when people think you need them emotionally. Melissa hurried over. "We were just having a little family weekend." I looked at her. A little family weekend? With 40 people? It's not 40. 30? She folded her arms immediately. "Why are you acting like this?" That sentence right there? That's how manipulators talk. They skip what they did and jump straight to your reaction. I walked inside without answering. The place smelled like sunscreen, beer, and burnt meat. My kitchen counters were covered in bottles. Somebody had cracked one of my dining chairs. And then I noticed the hallway closet. Open. Empty. I turned slowly. "Where are the fishing rods?" Melissa blinked. "What?" "The custom rods. Where are they?" "Oh, Tyler said her brother borrowed them." Borrowed. Of course. By then, people had started gathering awkwardly around the living room, nobody talking, everybody sensing the vibe change. Then Tyler walked in from outside, smiling nervously. "Dad, hey man, you should have told us you were coming." Man, not Dad, not after what he knew. I stared at him for a long second. "You gave out keys to my house." Tyler rubbed the back of his neck. "It's not like that." "Then explain it." Melissa jumped in before he could answer. "Oh my God, Frank, why are you making this such a huge thing? We're family." There it was again. Family. People love using that word right before they disrespect boundaries. I nodded slowly. Then I pulled a folded paper from my jacket pocket and placed it on the counter. Tyler frowned. "What's that?" "Notice of trust restructuring." Silence. Melissa laughed nervously. "What does that even mean?" "It means the lake house, my investment accounts, and every property under my name have been moved into an irrevocable trust as of this morning." Tyler stared at me. Melissa stopped smiling. I kept my voice calm. "It also means nobody inherits anything automatically anymore." The room got dead quiet. You could hear the lake water hitting the dock outside. Melissa finally scoffed. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said softly. "I'm being awake." Tyler stepped closer. "Dad, come on, this is crazy." "What's crazy is strangers sleeping in my bedroom while your wife hands out keys like party favors." Melissa's face turned red. "We never stayed in your room." I looked directly at her. "The security cameras say otherwise." Boom. That hit hard, because guilty people always forget cameras exist. Tyler looked stunned. Cameras? Every room except bathrooms. Now everybody looked uncomfortable. Good. Melissa tried another tactic immediately. Tears. right on schedule. I can't believe you'd spy on family. I almost smiled. That's another trick manipulative people use. They violate your boundaries, then act offended when you notice. I picked up an empty vodka bottle from the counter. You know what hurts the most? I asked quietly. Nobody answered. This house was built with overtime hours your mother cried through. Tyler looked down instantly. She packed my lunches at 4 a.m. for 22 years, while I worked double shifts to buy this place. My throat tightened the first time. And now your in-laws treated like spring break in Daytona. Melissa snapped. My family is not trash. I looked around the destroyed kitchen, then at the beer cans outside floating near my dock, then back at her. I didn't say trash, I replied calmly. You heard that yourself. Her face went pale. That's the thing about truth. You don't have to yell it, it lands anyway. Tyler tried stepping between us. Dad, come on, we can clean everything up. This was never about cleaning. Then what is it about? I looked him dead in the eye. Respect. Real silence hit after that. Not awkward silence. Heavy silence. The kind that forces people to sit with themselves. Then Melissa crossed her arms again. So, what now? I pulled another envelope from my jacket. Everybody who doesn't legally live here has 2 hours to leave. What? She shouted. The locksmith is coming at 6. Tyler looked horrified. You're changing the locks? I'm changing a lot more than locks. Melissa laughed angrily. You can't just kick family out. I finally lost my smile. Watch me. Nobody moved, so I did something they never expected. I walked over to the breaker panel in the laundry room and shut off the electricity. The entire house dropped into silence. AC dead, music gone, TV black, only stunned faces staring at me. Then I said the coldest thing I've ever said in my life. Party's over, folks. And for the first time in years, nobody argued with me.